Greetings and welcome back to the Casual Wargamer. One of the first ideas I had for this channel, in addition to doing Warhammer 40k, was to cover some other war games that I have played or do play as alternatives. After all, I'm the Casual Wargamer, not the Casual 40ker. One of those that I was going to do early on, but never got round to, was Grimdark Future by One Page Rules. And recently, strangely enough, this seems to be coming up on a number of videos that I have seen on YouTube recently. Tabletop Minions did one today, and he talked about it a few videos back. And I've recently been watching a series by Good Enough Gaming. He's done like 3 videos so far comparing One Page Rules to Games Workshop and 40k to Grimdark Future. So I thought, okay, I missed my shot. I shall jump on the bandwagon. So this is a basic sort of thoughts and rundown on Grimdark Future. I will touch on a couple of other ones later on, but for today, this is the topic of choice. So I first became aware of One Page Rules probably towards the end of COVID. So at this point, a couple of years ago. Didn't really pay much attention to it. It was kind of a throwaway discussion on a Facebook chat I had been following. And it was only last year, 2022, that I actually got to play it. A friend of mine had contacted me and said, hey, anyone want to try this? No one else in our sort of like circle was interested, but I said, yeah, I'll give it a go. I'm happy to give anything a try. And we played a few games. And I didn't mind it. So, I'm going to sort of cover that a bit later on as well. So for those that don't know, and I don't know the full details, One Page Rules, I'm going to call them a company. I don't think company is the right word, because it was the creation of people who had decided to move away from Warhammer 40k, away from Games Workshop, and create their own game. I think they were disenfranchised or disillusioned, whatever the right term is, by the direction that 40k had gone. It was very much a rules-intensive game. There were stratagems up the wazoo and so on. And they wanted something a little bit more simpler, something that would be more easier to play, easier to learn, wasn't so intensive on the old brain matter. And they have done a series of games that are variations, effectively, on what Games Workshop have given us. There's an Age of Sigmar equivalent called Age of Fantasy. You've got a Blood Bowl equivalent. You've got an old Warhammer Fantasy Battle equivalent. You've got a Kill Team / Necromunda equivalent, and you've got a similar one for Age of Fantasy. All using basically the same system. And you can certainly see that I think Games Workshop have taken notice of this, because it's odd that 10th edition resembles One Page Rules a little bit. They've obviously copied a few ideas that they saw worked. Now, again, I'm going to preface a little bit. I played 2nd edition One Page Rules, and I believe they have recently launched a 3rd edition. Of their core system, which I am not familiar with. It is something I'm going to take a look at and try and get my friend playing again. Now, one of the nice things about One Page Rules, about Grimdark Future, is they copy, well, I say copy, that's not the right word, but all your Warhammer 40k armies exist in it. Under a different name and different variations. But essentially, if you play Ultramarines, you can play Battle Brothers or Prime Brothers, depending on what you want to call them. There are Havoc Brothers, which are your Chaos Marines. There's Alien Hives, which are Tyranids. Planetary Defense Forces, which are your Astra Militarum, and so on. They've also copied some armies for a couple other games. Mantic do a science fiction game, the name of which suddenly goes out of my head as I'm recording this, but they've done copies of some of their armies. And there's also, I believe, like an equivalent if you wanted to play a Kroot army from 40k. And they've added, I think there's a couple as well which are their own, like a Lizardman army and a kind of feudal Japan type army as well in space. The system is very simple. Forget what 40k gives you. This is very simplified. I think how to put it. There's no meat to the bones of this thing. It's easy to learn. It's easy to teach. It's simple and straightforward to play, which is a good thing. For those that want it, unlike 40k now, there is a point system. So if you want that upgrade, you want that extra squad size, you want those extra weapons, you want a medic in your squad, it's going to cost you points. So if you don't like 40k's current 1 point score for a 5-man unit, double it for a 10-man unit and take whatever upgrade you want. You don't like that. You like the minutia, then you'll like what One Page Rules does with Grimdark Future. The problem for me, and it's always easier to pick the things you don't like over the things you do like. The game is fun. It's straightforward. One of the things for me is that thing about there's no meat on the bones is what kind of made it that I wasn't going to swap over from 40k. 40k, there's a lot of crunch to the rule system, and Grimdark Future doesn't have that. Now, bear in mind that the free rules are very simplified. You can download. There is apparently a more thicker rule set if you subscribe to I'm not sure, I'm going to say Patreon or Discord, I forget which. I think it's a Discord. If you sign up and pay like $5 a month, you can get extra stuff like STL files and a chunkier rulebook that contains more options. From what I understand, there are rules in that, but they are very much you pick and choose what you want to include in your games. It's not like a flat, this is the full rule set. And you can happily play the basic free rules to your heart's content and still have very good games with it. But there's nothing to it. It is very, very simple. Now, if that appeals to you, then absolutely great. But it's one of the things that basically went, I'm not going to be playing this to the extent that I play 40k or other games. Even as a casual player, I still want that bit of crunch to my rule systems. One thing that I do like about it quite a bit, if you saw my video on 40k editions, Rogue Trader, one of the things that I mentioned is kind of like that universe wasn't set in stone. It was an anything could happen sort of thing. And to use a couple of examples from that work with one-page rules, you can have something like, your planetary governor, his daughter's been kidnapped by orcs, so he decides to hire some Havoc brothers, offering them weapons and maybe some sacrifices from the lower classes who aren't going to be missed to bring her back alive and intact. Or, a traveller comes to the Imperial Palace and says, I'm from the future, and there won't be a future for this planet if you don't deal with those alien hives, which overrun us in my timeline 50 years from now. Stuff that wouldn't work in the current universe of 40k worked in Rogue Trader and works very well for how Grimdark Future plays. It's got a very strong Rogue Trader vibe, which was one of the big selling points for me. If you're not a narrative player and you just play the battles, then it's not going to make any difference. But for me, I like to know why armies are fighting, and that feel to the game, even to the rules, I suppose, to an extent, was a big selling point. There's a lot of freedom to the lack of a universe for it, if you know what I mean. Another good thing is that they have a free online army builder, which is very simple to use. Absolutely awesome. Its design is something that Games Workshop should look at, I think, for their app rather than what we have in the 40k app now. The other problem, though, that you will have with one-page rules is it's all right if you and your friend want to play it, every Friday night, whatever, and he comes over, you go over, whatever. 40k is the £900 gorilla in the room. It has a community. It has a lot of updates. It has a following. One-page rules, Grimdark Future doesn't have that. There are tournaments for it, and they're great, but you're going to be hard pressed to get people to play it. I think more than once anyway. I say my friend and I played it a good few games. We put it on the local store's Discord and said about it. Other than I think the store manager looking at it going cool because there was an equivalent to his army, Deathwatch, no one else was interested because they had 40k. So you might be hard pressed, even if you like it, to get people to play it. I think it's perfect if you don't like the system that Games Workshop uses for its publications. If you don't like the constant rules changes, the points changes, you don't like how complex the rules can be and trying to find, you've got players who will look for every little bit of minutia to get something out of it, you'll like this. If you just want a friendly game where you can turn up and just, a couple of hours, for a 1,000-point game, for example, there's probably a third, maybe a quarter less models on the table, and it plays so much quicker that you could probably get 2 games in an evening, where a 1,000-point game you might only get 1. You could easily fit a good few games in a day if you really wanted to, more than you could with 40k. I recommend giving it a try if you haven't, and seeing what you think, especially if you like the simpler rule set. Anyway, I'm fed up of saying simpler rule set and what have you. So I'm going to leave it at that. That's my kind of very basic thoughts on one-page rules, Grimdark Future. Again, as I say, I recommend trying it out. Give it a go. Let me know in your comments down below what you thought. You agree, disagree? It's all good. Give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed the video. Hit the subscribe button. It would help the channel grow. And until next time, take care, guys. Good gaming.